Please, run away from your husband right now. The truth is, 13 years ago. The doctor's words left me in shock. I had only brought my sick husband for a routine checkup today, so why was the doctor telling me something so terrifying? Listen, you might be in danger too. It's better to take some precautions. The doctor's eyes conveyed the seriousness of the situation, making it clear that this was no joke. I swallowed hard. Until now, I had pitied my husband for his illness, but now a different emotion began to surface. I understand. Thank you for telling me. I needed to do something, anything, as soon as possible. My name is Ellie, 53 years old. I've been working as a full-time employee at a reasonably large pharmaceutical company for the past 30 years. Working at the same company for so long made my workplace feel as comfortable as home. There aren't many women my age who continue to work as full-time employees, so I feel like everyone respects me for it. The reason I've been able to work as a full-time employee until this age is that I was single until 3 years ago. 3 years ago, the head of my department jokingly teased me, saying, "Ellie, looks like you're never getting married." Looking back now, I realize it might have been considered harassment, but I was already at an age where it didn't bother me much. In addition, the department head and I were in the same cohort, so we could exchange playful banter. Actually, the department head was also single, so we bonded as fellow singles. "Well, I am looking, you know." "Oh, is that so? My bad. Let's both do our best in finding someone." "Yeah, definitely." While saying that to the department head, secretly I was seeing someone, and things were going quite well between us. That someone was my current husband, John. He was 5 years older than me and had been married once before, but had since divorced. John and I met through a marriage consulting agency. We both didn't want children and were looking for someone to spend our leisurely lives with. Since we hadn't officially married yet, we had decided not to tell anyone, so even when the department head teased me about marriage, I just responded vaguely. A few months later, John and I were able to get married without any issues. Of course, we didn't have a wedding ceremony or anything, just submitted the marriage registration to the city office. I felt a bit anticlimactic that the marriage I had imagined so far had happened so easily. "From now on, let's take care of each other." "Yes, definitely." "Same here." John was a businessman working in a factory, and honestly, my income was higher than his. The factory where John currently works seems to be the one he joined after graduating from high school. I grew up in an orphanage and had a strong determination to become a self-sufficient adult, so I didn't want to give up the position of a full-time employee at the pharmaceutical company that I had once obtained. Therefore, even after getting married, I decided to continue working at my current company without any change. As soon as I married John, I reported it to the department head. Although the department head congratulated me with a congratulations, he seemed to have a somewhat complex expression. Perhaps he felt lonely because I, who had been a fellow single, had now tied the knot. When I teased him about it, he responded with a strong "don't be silly," so I decided to leave it at that. I was excited about starting a new life with John. I couldn't remember the last time I felt so excited. Imagining a bright future. I never thought at that time that such things awaited me in the future. Our newlywed life went smoothly. Despite being married, since I was still working at the company, our lifestyle didn't change much. However, we bought a cheap used house in the countryside, and since our living area became rural, John started commuting by car instead of subway. The car was originally mine. Since John didn't have a car, he started using mine as a shared vehicle. About a year into our marriage, things started to go awry in our once smooth marital life. Depression, you say? Yes. It's a mental issue, so based on what John has told me, it's safe to say he's experiencing some level of depression. John's behavior had been odd lately. He'd wake up with a gloomy expression, leaving more than half of his breakfast untouched. Whether he was absent-minded or not, he started making mistakes like mixing up soy sauce and sauce, or wearing mismatched socks. I initially thought it might be a worry, but he continued to make small mistakes every day, even at work. Although he wasn't particularly talkative to begin with, he became even more reserved than before. While I used to appreciate John's reserved and dependable nature, his newfound silence was unsettling. Despite living together, it felt like I was living alone, and it was lonely. From such subtle changes, I began to suspect that he might have a mental illness, so I took John to the nearest psychiatric clinic. And the diagnosis was depression. I had some vague knowledge about depression, so when I heard that my husband had fallen into depression, everything went dark before my eyes. The best treatment for depression is to remove the cause. Do you have any idea what could be causing it? I don't know. He's been working at the same factory for decades, so it's hard to imagine him suddenly getting depressed now. His department hasn't changed either. If anything, I feel like the biggest change was us getting married. I see. But you haven't been pressuring him at home, have you? No, we were living happily together. So, I don't know what went wrong. I see. If anything else happens, feel free to come back anytime. Let's work together to find a treatment. Yes. Thank you. After that, we visited this psychiatric clinic several times, but we never figured out the cause of John's depression, and his symptoms didn't improve. On the contrary, they got worse day by day. On the worst days, he would crawl back into bed saying, "I have a headache" as soon as he woke up, and sometimes he would end up taking several days off from work. He also stopped eating properly, so he rapidly lost weight. He ended up taking a leave of absence from work, but since it didn't seem like he would be able to return, he ultimately decided to quit. I'm sorry. I'm causing you trouble. No, it's okay. I actually love working, believe it or not. It seemed like John felt guilty about making me work all the time. I just wished for John's symptoms to improve quickly and went to work. I couldn't bear to see John suffering like that. After he quit his job and started staying home, I worried about him while I was at work. There was a time when he went out alone like a dementia patient and didn't come back. He said he couldn't find his way home. Maybe he was suffering from both depression and dementia. My stress kept piling up. Ellie, are you okay lately? Is your husband's condition not getting any better? Yeah, it's still bad. I see. You should take a break too. Here, have this. Gratefully accepting the energy drink the boss handed me, I drank it all on the spot. It eased my mood a little. Thank you. No, we help each other out when in need. I felt like crying at the boss's kindness. I was doing my best to support John, but I realized I had been accumulating stress without even realizing it. I shouldn't push myself too hard. If something were to happen to me and I collapsed, we would both be in trouble. I need to stay strong. With that thought in mind, I calmly went to work every day. 2 years passed since then. This year marks our 3rd anniversary since getting married. John's symptoms continued to worsen with no sign of improvement. One day, as I was about to leave for work, I noticed that the car parked next to the entrance was missing. I blinked several times, puzzled. Since John developed depression symptoms, I was the only one driving the car. So, if the car was missing, it meant I must have moved it somewhere, but yesterday I didn't go anywhere after returning from work. In other words, it was impossible for the car to not be in front of the house. Do you know where the car went? I asked John in a panic. I don't know. I think it was there when I came back yesterday, came the indifferent response. Yesterday, I remember John went out while I was at work, and he returned an hour after I got back from work. The doctor had recommended walks or jogging for a change of pace, so John probably went jogging yesterday as well. When John came back and the car was there, it meant that the car disappeared sometime between last night and this morning. With a question mark floating above my head, I decided to commute using the bus and subway for the day. Using a different mode of transportation than usual made me about 10 minutes late, but when I explained the situation, my boss forgave me, saying, "That's unfortunate. I wonder what happened. Did your husband take it somewhere?" I doubt it. He said he saw the car yesterday. Plus, since he got sick, he's been avoiding driving because it's dangerous. I see. It seemed like my boss suspected that John might know something. However, I knew how volatile John's moods were and how prone he was to making mistakes in daily life. So, I couldn't imagine John somehow managing to deal with the car. As soon as work ended that day, I immediately filed a theft report with the police. I hoped the car would come back soon, but I was anxious that it might not return at all. Other strange things happened too. When I went to the bank to update my passbook on payday, I found that the balance was 0. Although we had a joint account, the passbook I checked at that time was for my personal account. When I checked the joint account, it also showed a 0 balance. What's going on? Since John had access to the joint account, I couldn't help but suspect that he had done something. However, I hadn't told John anything about my account, and he shouldn't know the PIN either. Yet, the fact that all the savings had disappeared sent shivers down my spine. As soon as I got home, I asked John about it. "Have you withdrawn any money from our account recently?" "Huh? What are you talking about?" "The balance is 0. Do you know anything about it?" While John seemed highly suspicious, it wasn't wise to jump to conclusions and accuse him, especially considering his depression. I didn't want to cause him any additional mental stress. "I don't know. You've been managing the household finances, and I haven't done anything." As John answered while staring at the ceiling, he seemed absent-minded. There were times when John spaced out like this, undoubtedly due to his illness. Would John, in such a state, withdraw money? I decided to consult the police about this matter as well. In the end, neither the car nor the stolen money was found. Losing the car was shocking, but not having money added to my anxiety. In times like these, if I had reliable parents, I could borrow money from them. Unfortunately, I grew up in an orphanage with no parents. The only one I had was my husband, who had developed depression. I became increasingly overwhelmed with panic and loneliness. It was just yesterday that we were advised to change John's hospital. The local clinic we had been visiting for treatment seemed to have reached its limits. The doctor wrote a referral letter for us, and we were now scheduled to visit a general hospital. For our first visit to the general hospital for a regular checkup, we had to take a train to the nearest station and then took taxi. It was my first time going to a general hospital, so I felt nervous. John continued to walk silently, as usual. I took a deep breath and walked through the doors of the hospital. At the reception, I handed over the referral letter and waited for John's name to be called. Given that it was a general hospital, there were many patients waiting at the reception. I vaguely thought it would take some time. After about an hour, John's name was finally called. He entered the examination room. While waiting, I had been reading a book, but shortly after John was called into the examination room, a nurse unexpectedly called me. Are you John's wife?" "Yes. The doctor would like to speak with you." "Could you please come with me?" Okay." It was not uncommon for me to receive explanations about John's illness, so I assumed it would be something similar this time and followed the nurse. Taken to a separate room from the examination room, I nervously stepped inside. "I apologize for summoning you. Please have a seat." The doctor seemed quite humble, and that was my initial impression. He appeared to be about 10 years older than me, with hair mixed with white and a beard growing. His face seemed kind. Is it about my husband's condition?" I asked the doctor myself. He nodded vigorously. I braced myself for the words that would follow, thinking his condition must be quite serious. "I'll be straightforward, and this might make you uncomfortable." I tensed up, wondering what it could be. "You need to leave your husband immediately." Actually, he was once arrested for fraud 13 years ago. "What?" I was shocked by the terrifying fact the doctor revealed. "I was just here today for my husband's regular checkup for his illness, so why was I being told this by the doctor?" My mind was already in a panic. "We were conducting your husband's regular checkup, and during the interview, I felt like I had seen his face somewhere before." Some of his answers during the interview made me doubt if he really is a patient suffering from depression. I've been a psychiatrist for about 10 years and have treated many patients. He doesn't seem to have depression. It seemed to me like he might be pretending to have it. And then I remembered. I've seen him before. I've treated him. The doctor's revelation about my husband fills my heart with suspicion and makes my heart beat faster. I was a surgeon until 10 years ago. Just about 13 years ago, a patient was brought in with a deep cut on his right leg. I treated him at that time. Today, when I saw the large scar on your husband's leg, I realized I had seen his face before. I recognized him as a patient I treated before. I see. Indeed, there is a large scar on John's right leg. I never asked about it, and he never mentioned it. Meeting the doctor who treated John today was a coincidence, but even such coincidences are not impossible. He got into an argument with his then-wife and got injured. Later, I found out that the cause of the argument was because he defrauded his ex-wife. Fraud. Yes. It seems he took her branded items and money. What's worse is that he lied about having dementia. Dementia. It's the same as now. Pretending to be sick and deceiving his wife to commit fraud. It's the worst kind of act. The shocking confession leaves me speechless. My husband has a criminal record and was once arrested. Moreover, his methods seem familiar. If I had parents, maybe they would have looked into his background, but I was just ecstatic to find a marriage partner at my age. Therefore, I never thought to investigate his background. Is it okay? You might also be in danger. It's better to take some action. The doctor said, looking straight at me. This couldn't be a joke. I had been deceived by John. Realizing this, I couldn't just stand idly by. I understand. Thank you for letting me know. I had to do something, anything. As I walked beside John, who had just come out of the examination room, I desperately thought of a plan. Afterward, I quickly installed cameras throughout the house to record John's movements while I was away. The cameras were tiny, and I was confident John wouldn't notice them. I deliberately placed some high-end brand bags and watches I had purchased and stored away in conspicuous places, keeping an eye on them. A week later, when the bags and watches were missing, I checked the recorded footage from the cameras. There, I saw John stealing the bags and watches, then leaving the house. About 2 hours later, when John returned home, he took out money from an envelope and grinned suspiciously. I was convinced by his smirk, which didn't seem like that of a person suffering from depression. John had stolen my car and savings. I can't believe it was John all along. I muttered, filled with disbelief, but the evidence in front of me couldn't be shaken. John had lied and deceived me. He had taken money and valuable items from me, pretending to be sick without a care in the world. Unforgivable. What was the point of working hard and taking care of John? At this point, simply divorcing him wouldn't be enough for me. While separating was inevitable, I wanted to somehow make John regret his actions. I wanted him to apologize for deceiving me and repaying kindness with malice. With tears threatening to fall, I prepared the divorce papers and filled in the necessary details. The next day, as usual, I informed him that I was going to work and headed to the police station. Although I had taken a paid leave from work the day before, they accepted my request for emergency leave the next day. My husband has deceived me and stolen money from me. I told the police, showing them the recorded footage. Since it was difficult to make a judgment based solely on the recording, the police contacted a second-hand dealer where my husband was suspected of selling stolen goods. Afterward, when they investigated the whereabouts of my missing car, they found that it had also been sold second-hand. It was John who withdrew money from my account, and it turned out that his depression was also a lie. Within moments, John's facade of lies began to crumble, and I was overwhelmed with a mixture of relief, sadness, and indescribable emotions. John Springs has a criminal record. We'll head to your residence immediately. Yes, please do. What followed could only be described as a whirlwind of events. I returned home with the police officer. It was already past 3 p.m. I'm home, I uttered, returning during the day when I was supposed to be at work, and John let out a surprised huh? His eyes widened as he noticed the police officer following behind me. What's going on? John, let's get divorced. I handed him the divorce papers I had concealed in my bag. Without even glancing at the divorce papers, John stared intently at the police officer. John Springs. You're under arrest for fraud. The police officer, showing his badge, approached John. John took a step back and exclaimed, "What? You lied to me, didn't you? You weren't really depressed, were you? What are you talking about? I've been going to therapy for depression for 2 years now." Depression is a mental condition, so it's difficult to determine if it's true or not. But I was told by the doctor I saw recently. You used to pretend to have dementia and deceive your ex-wife, right? The doctor said he treated your injury. And also, he suspected that you weren't a depression patient based on your responses. You're just making things up. I'm a legitimate depression patient. It's too cruel of you to suddenly abandon me like this. John, who could boldly come up with excuses even in front of the police, seemed accustomed to deceiving people. I realized that he wouldn't be shaken by trivial matters, considering he had dealt with the police once before. And besides, where's the evidence that I committed fraud? If you want evidence, here it is. I showed John the footage of him turning my belongings into money. What the hell? Taking videos like this without permission, isn't that a crime? John shouted, trembling. Honestly, asking for evidence while facing the police was beyond common sense. The fact that they were arresting him meant they had gathered sufficient evidence. In that sense, John was being naive. You know, you deceived me for 3 years, not only stealing my car and money but also trampling on my goodwill? Blaming me while ignoring your own sins. Don't you have any sense of decency? Have you lost your mind? But it's your fault for being so gullible. If you hadn't been fooled, none of this would have happened. You're such an idiot. After taking care of him so much, he repaid my kindness with treachery and even dared to insult me. Hearing John's words, the tension inside me snapped. Who do you think I've been working so hard for? I've been doing my best just for you to get better. And you repay me with such cruelty, thinking you can get away with it. I don't want to hear another word from you ever again. I'll consult a lawyer and of course, I'll demand compensation. Go to the police right away, you worthless scum. The firmness in my voice, which startled even the police, seemed to knock the wind out of John on the spot. Without hesitation, the police swiftly handcuffed John, who had become weak-kneed. Unable to move, John seemed to resign himself with a sigh, his head hanging down. The police led away the slumping John. I watched the scene unfold as if it were happening to someone else. Ever since the doctor warned me to escape from John, I had felt detached from reality. Even as I witnessed John being escorted away by the police, it still felt like I was in a dream. Well, it's back to life before marriage. While I was relieved not to become John's slave for life, there was also a sense of loneliness. After finally reaching marriage at the age of 50, the thought of being alone again left me feeling desolate. 2 weeks later, I officially divorced John. Although his arrest delayed the divorce slightly, by the time it was finalized, my mind had cooled down, and I could now calmly accept what had happened to John and me. It's unclear what John's sentence will be, but considering it's his second offense, the punishment will likely be severe. Anyway, I hope John reflects on his actions. I earnestly wish he doesn't make the same mistake again. I guess marriage was just an illusion for me in the end. I sighed heavily during lunch break, eating the bento I had bought. The department head came over and started eating convenience store oden next to me. Is that so? I think it would be fine if it were me. He said, in such a natural manner that I almost brushed it off and replied, is that right? However, understanding the meaning behind his words, I felt my ears grow warm in embarrassment. Are you serious about that? Yeah. I'm always serious, the department head said casually. Left speechless, I stopped eating my meal. Well, just give it some thought. The department head said as he finished his oden and briskly returned to work. Stunned, I continued eating my bento. I never imagined having such a relationship with the department head. But I know he always cares about me. He's reliable, and his income is high. Maybe I hadn't considered it, but he might actually be a good catch. Despite thinking such rude thoughts, I felt a warm feeling enveloping me. Once work is over, maybe I'll invite him out for a meal. It wouldn't hurt to give it another try from around there, right?